In the age of steel giants, when oceans trembled under the weight of battleships and naval guns roared louder than thunder, armor was supposed to mean invincibility. Battleships wore steel plating several feet thick, designed to shrug off enemy fire like rain on iron. Admirals trusted that armor. Sailors believed in it. Nations spent fortunes forging it. But somewhere deep inside U.S. Navy research facilities, a secret was taking shape. A shell so devastating that it didn't need to explode on impact. It didn't rely on luck or volume of fire. Instead, it punched through battleship armor like a hammer through glass, detonating inside the enemy ship where damage was fatal. For decades, this shell changed naval warfare. Quietly, brutally, and decisively. This is the story of the secret shell the U.S. Navy used to crack battleship armor open. By the early 20th century, naval warfare had reached a deadlock. Battleships grew bigger, guns grew larger, armor grew thicker. Every improvement in firepower was matched by an improvement in protection. Japanese battleships like Yamato carried armor plates over 16 inches thick. German ships like Bismarck were layered with complex belt systems designed to deflect shells at angles. British ships relied on hardened faceplates and sloped designs. Standard high-explosive shells simply weren't enough. They exploded on impact, wasting most of their energy outside the armor. Even when they damaged the surface, they failed to reach vital internals, magazines, engines, fire control rooms. The U.S. Navy realized a terrifying truth. If you can't kill what's inside the battleship, you haven't killed the battleship. American naval engineers began asking a dangerous question. What if a shell didn't explode immediately? What if it survived impact, pierced the armor, and only detonated after entering the ship? This idea led to the development of armor-piercing capped APC shells, later perfected into super-heavy armor-piercing SHAP shells. These shells weren't just ammunition. They were engineering weapons. Every gram of steel, every angle, every fuse delay was calculated to defeat battleship armor scientifically. The most feared version was the U.S. Navy's 16-inch, super-heavy armor-piercing shell, used by Iowa-class and South Dakota-class battleships. This shell weighed an astonishing 2,700 pounds. That is heavier than a small car. Unlike explosive shells, most of its weight was solid hardened steel. The explosive filler was minimal because penetration, not blast, was the priority. The nose was capped with a soft armor-piercing cap, which prevented shattering on impact. Behind it sat an ultra-hard penetrator body. When fired, this shell traveled at extreme velocity, but not too fast. Too much speed would cause it to break. Apart, U.S. engineers found the perfect balance. Here's what made the shell terrifying. When it struck a battleship's armor belt, the soft cap flattened, gripping the steel surface instead of bouncing off to the hardened body followed, focusing all kinetic energy into a tiny point. Armor plates didn't explode outward. They failed inward. Cracks spread through steel measured in feet. The shell pushed through intact, still moving, still deadly. Only after passing through armor, bulkheads, and decks did the delayed fuse ignite. The explosion happened inside the ship. That meant boiler rooms destroyed, magazines ignited, turrets disabled, crew vaporized. One successful hit could cripple or kill a battleship. Enemy sailors feared these shells more than bombs or torpedoes. Why? Because you couldn't see them coming. There was no massive fireball on impact, just a violent, metallic punch, and followed seconds later by hell erupting inside the ship. Japanese naval intelligence struggled to understand how U.S. battleships were scoring such lethal penetrations at long range. German engineers admitted after the war that American shells performed better against armor than most European designs. The shell didn't just destroy steel, it destroyed confidence. During World War II, U.S. Navy testing showed these shells could penetrate over 26 inches of vertical armor, multiple armored decks, reinforced turret faces. In battle simulations, a single Iowa-class battleship firing super-heavy AP shells could theoretically disable an enemy capital ship in minutes. Although battleship-to-battleship duels were rare, the threat alone reshaped naval doctrine. Enemy commanders avoided direct engagements. Because armor no longer guaranteed survival, the U.S. Navy didn't advertise this shell. Why? Because once enemies understood how it worked, they could redesign armor to counter it. Instead, the shell was protected by classified ballistic data, restricted manufacturing techniques, limited export information, Even allies didn't receive full details. The shell became an invisible advantage, hidden behind steel doors and classified reports. Ironically, this terrifying shell arrived just as battleships began fading. Aircraft carriers changed naval warfare. Torpedoes and bombs attacked from above and below, where armor was weakest. But the legacy remained. The super heavy AP shell proved something eternal. No armor is invincible, only misunderstood. Modern penetrator weapons, bunker busters, kinetic energy rounds, hypersonic warheads, all trace their philosophy back to this idea. Penetrate first. Destroy from within. What made this shell truly revolutionary wasn't just its size or weight. It was science applied with ruthless precision. U.S. Navy engineers studied steel failure like surgeons study anatomy. They learned that armor doesn't simply stop shell, it absorbs, bends, fractures, and transfers stress. The super heavy AP shell exploited those weaknesses. Instead of trying to smash armor apart, it overloaded the steel's internal structure. Microfractures formed instantly on impact. Stress waves rippled through the plate faster than the metal could react. By the time the armor tried to resist, it was already failing. This wasn't brute force. It was engineered inevitability. The shell's delayed fuse was just as deadly as its penetrator body. If it exploded too early, the blast was wasted. If it exploded too late, it might pass through without lethal damage. So the U.S. Navy created a precise millisecond delay fuse designed to activate only after penetrating multiple layers of armor and internal bulkheads. That meant the explosion occurred. Inside engine rooms, beneath turrets, near ammunition magazines. In naval warfare, those spaces were the ship's heart and brain. When the shell detonated there, damage was catastrophic. Fires, flooding, power loss, and structural collapse all at once. Other nations tried to copy the idea, but copying the shape was easy. Copying the metallurgy was not. The U.S. Navy had access to superior heat treatment processes, consistent steel quality, advanced testing ranges. German shells often shattered at high impact angles. Japanese shells performed well but lacked consistency. British designs favored blast over penetration. American shells were different. They were boringly reliable, and that made them terrifying. After World War II, the U.S. conducted classified armor tests on captured ships and surplus hulls. The results stunned observers. Armor belts once thought impenetrable were defeated, at ranges previously considered safe. Turret faces cracked. Internal compartments were pulverized. In some tests, the shell punched through multiple armored decks, detonating deep inside the hull. The conclusion was unavoidable. Battleship armor had reached the end of its usefulness. From the outside, a battleship hit might look intact. Inside, it was hell. Steel fragments became shrapnel. Shockwaves ruptured lungs. Fires spread through cable tunnels and ventilation shafts. Crews were trapped in darkness, heat, and smoke. Survivors described the sound not as an explosion, but as the ship screaming. One shell, one hit. Hundreds of lives changed forever. This weapon didn't just sink ships. It erased them from the inside out. History books focus on aircraft carriers, nuclear bombs, and missiles. But this shell sits quietly in museums, misunderstood, underestimated, almost forgotten. Why? Because it represents an uncomfortable truth. Technology doesn't always win through speed or size. Sometimes it wins through understanding. The super heavy AP shell didn't rely on chaos. It relied on certainty, and certainty is far more dangerous. Modern bunker buster bombs use the same philosophy. Tank penetrators use the same principles. Hypersonic weapons still follow the same rule. Penetrate first. Destroy later. The battleship is gone, but the idea this shell proved still dominates warfare today. Armor is no longer trusted. Only physics is. One of the most terrifying discoveries made by U.S. Navy analysts was this. When the super heavy AP shell penetrated armor, the armor itself became a weapon.